Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Global Investigative Journalism Masterclass with Martha Mendoza. I'm David Kaplan of GIJN. We're delighted to have you with us today. Good morning in the Americas, good afternoon in Europe, good evening in Asia, and all the ships at sea. We're just really tickled to have you today. Our guest today is one of my favorite journalists. Martha is a reporter's reporter. She's a two-time winner of the Pulitzer Prize. Her first Pulitzer came in 2000 as part of an Associated Press team that uncovered the massacre of Koreans by U.S. soldiers at the No-Gun-Ree Bridge during the Korean War. Her second Pulitzer in 2016 came for exposing the ties of slave labor in Southeast Asia, tying it all the way to the seafood sold in U.S. supermarkets. Her reporting team helped free 2,000 enslaved ship workers in Southeast Asia, and it won AP its first Pulitzer for public service. Now, you might wonder what kind of psychological profile would match someone who can win two Pulitzer Prizes like this. And so I did a little research on Martha. She played football, that's soccer to you Americans, for the University of California, Santa Cruz Banana Slugs. Do I have that right, Martha?
Yes.
Okay, good. She wrote for the school newspaper, City on a Hill Press, and she played French horn in the school symphony. So these are the things that make up a brilliant journalist. Martha became an AP reporter in 1995. She has reported from Silicon Valley, New York City, Mexico City, Bangkok, and has just had an exemplary career. She's also been a big supporter of GIJN, your host, the Global Investigative Journalism Network. We serve as the global hub for the world's investigative reporters. We provide training, resources. We've got a help desk that's free for journalists worldwide to use. We work to build the infrastructure that quality investigative and data journalism depend on around the world. So enough about us. Let's get to our featured attraction. Martha's going to offer hands-on training today to accompany her popular GIJN tip sheet, Investigating U.S. Influence Around the World. Now, this is designed to help journalists outside the U.S. understand how their countries are impacted by Washington and how to report it more effectively. Now, it also works the other way around to find out what your countries are doing in the United States. So keep your eye on that. Also, a quick note on fairness. We're not singling out the United States. We are interested in investigating all superpowers, and in fact, all countries with power in the world. On GIJN's site, you will find extensive resources on how to investigate Russia's global footprint, from disinformation to dirty tricks. You'll find a lot how to investigate Chinese activity from Beijing and Chinese businesses around the world. A couple other quick notes. We want to hear from you in the audience. Please send written questions and messages in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can. You can start writing your questions now. I also want to remind you that we have live interpretation today in 4 languages: Arabic, French, Russian, and Spanish. To use these services, go down to the bottom of your screen, click on the interpretation button, and simply select the language that you prefer. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Martha. And Martha, as we talked about, we'll leave time for questions as you go through different sections of your presentation. Over to you.
Thanks, David. Good morning or good evening or good afternoon, everybody. Thanks to GIJN. When we do this session in person, which I think it's been like, first time was maybe 10 years ago or so, there's always a lot of shouting going on between everybody in the room. And although we can't shout on Zoom, do your digital shouting and let's interact on this. If you want to hear about your own country, we can pivot. Also, thank you to Anne and Andrea for tremendous organization, and thank you to the interpreters who are making this information possible to everyone. As David said, I'm best at looking at US transparency, government and corporate transparency, but it's a gift to me if you can provide me or GIJN information about ways to peer into your own country's accountability and transparency. So without further ado, I'm going to share screen. First one I want to talk about is what is the US government spending money on in my country? And I should say, if you work your way through this entire worksheet from any country, you're going to have a story at the end of the day. So if you are able to self-motivate, you will find it. And looking at US foreign assistance by country, the first country I thought I would pick, although David can disrupt me, is Bangladesh, because I have a feeling we have a few friends from Bangladesh with us today. It's 7 p.m. when it strikes me that people in your country just get going based on my conversations. So this database lets you search by country and year. It also allows journalists to download spreadsheets. And there's just some key clicks on this page. So we are looking at US foreign assistance to Bangladesh here. We're looking at fiscal year 2020, and here's the key lesson I want to show you. Obligations versus disbursements. So obligations is the promise, disbursements is the follow through. And you can scroll down and see what the top promises in 2020 from the US to Bangladesh were. 125 million to an emergency program, who our top partners are, World Food Program or United Nations, and they break it into sectors. Unfortunately for Bangladesh, it's almost always massively emergency response, but you can see 10 million for refugee, Rohingya crisis. And I often, when I'm looking at a country, click here on all activities. You can see there's an opportunity for a data download here. And you can see in terms of obligations in 2020, let's look at Bangladesh Emergency Program. So this is through the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID. So the obligations were 125 million. Let's see about disbursements that year for the emergency program was 10 million. We also can look at the president's budget requests. This is the way the funding works in the United States is the president first makes a request, and then Congress appropriates and plans it. And then it's actually spent, usually through the State Department in terms of a country like Bangladesh, sometimes through the Defense Department in some other countries. And then they actually spend the money. And it, as you can see, it went from 125 million to 10 million that was actually spent. It's interesting to look at this year over year. So you can edit your filters and say, okay, that was 2020. What happened in 2021 in Bangladesh? And you can see that a lot more, 99 million of that Bangladesh emergency program was dispersed. And you can see that COVID response started going up in 2021. So this tool, you can look at trends, you can look at agencies, you can look beyond the US government, although that's a little bit weak. For me, the best is to download the spreadsheet and then start pulling the data and analyzing it by country. Questions on this? One thing you can do is you can click on these food for progress, for example, and you'll get an example of a little bit more detail about what it is. And I don't know about this one, but in some cases you can get some supporting documents related to that disbursement. In all cases, once you have this beautiful project number and this active ID, you can file a Freedom of Information Act. You have the managing agency. That Department of Agriculture will have a FOIA, F-O-I-A link on its website, and you can ask for all details related to this project. I'm looking at a red flag right now, which says that the implementing partner is Land O'Lakes Venture 37, which seems like that could be a private company in the United States. Questions on foreign assistance, or can we plunge ahead? I'm going to keep going. The next slide I want to show you is USA spending. This is how you see, it's kind of the next step from what I just showed you. This is looking at actual contracts, contract by contract. So in that last site, you could see, oh, the United States to spend 99 million on Bangladesh emergency programs. Well, what are the actual contracts? What are they spending it on? And there's two different sites that do this in the United States that track contracts. USA spending is supposed to be a little bit easier to look at. This has advanced search capabilities. It enables reporters, again, to look at spending at country and fiscal year. And I use this site all the time. I'll do I suggest you do advanced search if you're trying to find out what contracts are being spent in your country. All fiscal years, just for purpose of our demo. And then something that is like a little bit of a hack with this site, it's not a big deal, but you have to, if you want to know what country you're in, you have to go by location and select a country. Place of performance is what's critical. Where are they actually doing this work? So if it's wherever the job, the contractor is being sent to. And for, you can see they have all the countries and then some. And this morning, I'm gonna go to Mexico, where it's 8 in the morning, so I doubt anyone is up there, but I've added that filter. So we're doing all the years, and we're gonna look at Mexico. What is the US government contracting to spend in Mexico? And since we had a number of fiscal years, it covers a lot of time. I usually am most interested in doing this by date, by most recent. Yikes, what is that? This has us flipped today. Let's start. Well, I'll go away, the end of date. What I'm seeing are some data entry problems here, which is a little bit funny. But what you can, here it goes. What this looks at is contracts, grants, direct payments, loans to Mexico over time. You can have a map, you can categorize it. I'm going to unclick all fiscal years because it's being a little funny this morning, and I'm just going to go to the last 3 years and try that. This is much better. Still weird. So then what you can do is you can click on a recipient award ID. If you click on the name, you're going to get all the contracts that A. James Global Services has conducted. No. Yeah, we're in Mexico. Okay. But if you click on the award ID, you start getting some really good information. I'm curious about Boeing. So you get the awarding agency, the agency that gave the contract was the Department of Defense. The contractor, the US contractor that got it was the Boeing company. Here's the dates of the contract. So they're contracting well into the future. So those obligated amounts we were looking at prior, you can see sometimes it's a number of years, $116 million. They have these North American industry classification systems. So they have codes. So this is for building aircraft. Obligated amount was 116 million, but it could come $500 million. And you can see what they've been spending to date. And you can put these into tables. I don't know what these are about. F-15 Japan Super Inceptor option. If these are about F-15s, that would be an interesting story, for sure. And then what you can do is scroll down here and you can get some acquisition details. So you can find out that it is for an airplane. You can see, was this bid only one source? This was not available for competition. They didn't open up a bid. They picked Boeing. It's a definitive contract. And the foreign funding is coming from foreign military funding. So let me pick one more. These go back, you can see well into the past. There's anybody from Mexico who wants me to click on something specific, I'm happy to. There's a lot, the Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, these are all the US weapons companies.
So Martha,
Yeah.
it's stayed here. So these we're still in Mexico, right?
Yes.
And so these are tell me what's going on here. We're looking at US companies that have, in Boeing's case, a Pentagon contract to manufacture what looks like Japan F-15s for Japan in Mexico.
If I'm a reporter in Mexico and I see that, and I'm just wondering if my filter didn't work because this system is sleepy this morning, but if I'm the reporter seeing that, I'm calling the Defense Department's public affairs officers at the Pentagon with the contract number and asking them about it. But I actually think, Dave, that the filter wasn't filtering correctly there.
Huh.
And
Okay.
now this is a much better look at what we're doing. So these are the much more current contracts. Let me just look. Project Services International Corp. So this is a State Department contract with a Miami, Florida company, $178,000, pet and pet supply stores, operation training devices, and the money is going out next year. And you can see further information about who the recipient is. What this is, pet and pet supplies. And let's see. Canine equipment for aguas calientes and security. So somehow the State Department has decided to send close to $200,000 in pet-related contracts through this company, Project Services. So I'm going to look at the next one, which seems to have been about the next contracting date. And it's the same company, Project Services International Corp. Out of Miami. And this is for police protection, clothing.
Security riot equipment for Guanajuato State.
Security riot equipment for Guanajuato State. So they seem to be sending, yeah, security and riot equipment, police protection. And this is where US tax dollars are going. And this is where Mexico's police or prison officials are receiving their gear from, is from the US government. So this USA spending is a very cool place to look around. After the earthquake in Haiti, we used this to show that the US government 2 years in hadn't built a house in Haiti, even though they pledged $1.5 billion.
Martha, I think there
Yeah.
was some comments asking about Buscar Coca-Cola or Sierra Nevada. Is that
You know, I did see Sierra Nevada in there. Let's do another advanced search. And let's get rid of Mexico. Let's do all foreign countries, as the US likes to call them. And let's just do a keyword. So I'm going to take Mexico off. All foreign countries. Keyword Sierra Nevada. So Sierra Nevada, which as far as I know is a brewing company. The last time I was at their headquarters was during a wildfire in California's Sierra Nevada, which is one of our mountain ranges. But let's see what they're doing. Sparks, Nevada. This awarding agency is the General Services Administration and software publishers. That's confusing. The funding agency actually was the Department of Defense. Something to do with software publishing. I'm going to look at one more Sierra Nevada, and then I'm going to say this is exactly why what I'm demoing is something you need to do when you have a little bit of time to figure these things out. This is interesting. Army ABN Corps. Again, it's like software and telecommunications. So I think this is a different Sierra Nevada, perhaps. Let me press on because I'm going to be showing you how to look up different US corporations. But whoever spotted that, kudos, that's a good eye to see, like, that's a red flag. What is that company doing? Now I'm going to talk about lobbying disclosure. So in the United States, companies, industries, and other countries can spend money to lobby, to try to convince members of our Congress, our House or Senate, to pass laws, etc. Let me break this off. Okay. And so on my tip sheet, I have a link to what's called our lobbying disclosure. And I've often asked people in other countries, like, do you have this? And people just tell me this is done in private in a lot of places, but in the US, it's supposed to be public. And in fact, if you don't register as a lobbyist, you go to jail. And that has happened and does happen. So at our Lobbying Disclosure Act reports, you can click on registrations and quarterly activity reports, and then scroll down. So you can look at who the registrant is if you want to know who the lobbyist is, or who the client by name, or the type of report. But if you scroll down.
we're still seeing usaspending.gov. If you've changed, yeah.
Okay, good to know. Thank you for telling me.
Folks, that was Eunice Au of the GIJN staff who will be helping us with questions and
How about now, Eunice, do you see the lobbying disclosure base?
Yes.
Okay, great. So registrations and quarterly activity reports. Scroll on down. All the way at the bottom is foreign entities. Keep scrolling and pick a country. And I was curious about Ukraine. If Ukraine, in all of its chaos, definitely is trying to convince the United States to send it funding. And so I'm curious, in order to get that funding, they must convince our members of Congress to approve it. And so I'm going to search reports on Ukraine to see if anybody representing Ukraine has been lobbying the United States. I'm going to update our filing year to the most recent. And I see that a company called, or a lobbying company called Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schreck has been lobbying on behalf of what would be a Ukrainian interest, SCM Consulting Limited, this year. And also Hogan Lovells on behalf of a company known as North American Interpipe. Prior to that, there was no lobbying until there was one incident in 2020, 3 filings in 2018, but here we are in 2022. There's been definitely an uptick. And so to learn more about what they're lobbying for, you just click on the hyperlink and you get the actual lobbying registration form. The organization is Brownstein Hyatt Farber Schreck in Washington, D.C. There's a contact with a phone number and an email, so you can reach out to them straight off and ask them what's going on with this. The client is SCM Consulting Limited. I would say that they are a potentially offshore company, but you get the name of the lobbyist, Samantha Carl Yoder. This is the individual in Washington, D.C. who is now going to Capitol Hill and asking senators and Congress members specific lobbying issues, current and anticipated. Samantha's asking, having meetings with congressional staffers, asking about issues with access to financial markets in the US and visa issues. So she is extrapolating from this, trying to make sure that Ukrainians can get visas and that Ukrainians can have access to financial markets in the United States. You can scroll down further and see who the foreign entities are here. There's Met Invest, which is a Dutch company, and Azovstal, which is a Ukrainian company. I know nothing about these. And you can continue to see a little bit more, get into additional foreign entities who are also paying as lobbyists. Media Group Ukraine with a street address. Here's a Mariupol company and another Dutch company. And right here at the very bottom, there's one more additional foreign entity, a Kiev company called Ukrtelecom. So if you are in Ukraine and you are wondering what your government is trying to convince the US government of, you can look at these postings. I'm also curious what North American Pipe is doing. Again, you get to see the contact. You get their phone number, you get their email. If you contact them and say, I noticed you registered to lobby on behalf of Ukraine for a particular issue, they'll respond to you. That's a very, they're looking at that email. It's not some random box. The lobbyists are interesting. Let me show you this. The lobbyist here is Norm B. Coleman. And then it says what they used to do. And this is where you start to see real transparency and also some really concerning things. This guy, Norm B. Coleman, was a US Senator from 2003 to 2009. That means he has a lot of influence. He's buddy-buddy with people in the Senate. Ivan Zapian was Chief of Staff to US Senator Robert Menendez, and he was National Outreach Director for the House Democratic Caucus. Again, has a lot of good relationships. Here's another lobbyist. These are people who left public office, take well-paying private jobs, and then pressure Congress to pass laws or rules or regulations. And what these lobbyists are doing, and you can see they all have some former government affiliation. They were hired by a North American Interpipe, which is a steel pipe producer with plants in Ukraine. They're out of Houston, Texas. And the client, who's that Houston, Texas pipeline company, seeks assistance with government relations and the impact of trade rules and duties on the company's U.S. business. Now, just hold tight, because I'm going to be showing you how to look at what laws they may be trying to get introduced relating to a type of country. The foreign entity is Interpipe Ukraine, which I'm guessing is a sister company of this U.S. Texas. And there's David Kaplan's cousin is also lobbying here, so that's interesting, Dean. And so that is how you...
For the record, that's a joke. That is no relation.
Sorry.
Hey, Martha, don't these groups have to file periodic reports too? Or is that just domestic lobbyists?
They do need to file quarterly, and that's as far as we were looking, was quarterly. Yeah.
Martha, there are 3 questions related to this. I think the first one, someone missed the search part of it, because he's asking, how do you know this is for Ukraine, this lobbying disclosures?
Thank you. Thank you for slowing me down.
Those quarterly reports, as I recall, are full of great nuggets, like who's going to lunch with who and what gifts are given. Be cool if you could pull up one of those.
Let's see. I don't think with these foreign entities we get that level of detail. But the way I found the country was so you get this little search box if you click on the tool that we have up on the website, and you go down to foreign entities, and then you pick your country. This time we'll go with Uruguay. And then search reports. And we get 2 for Uruguay, which doesn't surprise me.
Thanks for that. The second question is whether this information is always reliable and not subject to manipulation and corruption.
There are people held accountable. So is it reliable? Yes. Is it complete? No. Do people from other countries lobby members of Congress without registering? Yes. But again, we have people go to jail for this. It is enforced. So it's imperfect, but it's the reports you do see at least are, I would say, very strong breadcrumbs toward getting somewhere. Let's see, I was just checking Taiwan, which the US government recognizes, at least in this way, as a foreign country. So this is really interesting to me. I have a little bit of an obsession with tuna. So why is Bumblebee Foods via Taiwan lobbying somebody? But I hope for the person who wasn't sure, excuse me, how I got there, you could then see from the search we just did, how you go to foreign entities, and that's where you find your country. Was there another question, Eunice?
Yes, the last question is what differs from this from the FARA database? What's different from this database compared to the FARA database? I think that's the Foreign Agents Registration Act, Department of Justice database. Yeah.
That is somebody who's after my own heart asking such a question. The difference is they're making a public disclosure at FARA of who's registered to represent a country, but here at the Senate lobbying disclosure, you get some more details about what their issues are, and sometimes you even get what their bills they're trying to get passed. So there's overlap there, but you could register at FARA to be a lobbyist for Ukraine, but not be doing anything. And so here you get the report that here's what they're doing and here's what the subject is about. These aren't a full story. These are the tidbits for a story to begin asking the questions. So then the next question to me is quite obviously, what are these Congress members, the US Congress, the House and Senate, thinking about or doing in my country? And congress.gov is the site that shows this. So you can look at the current Congress, you can look at all Congresses, which is many years. You can look at legislation, congressional records, members or nominations by source. I just am choosing current Congress. And this is when people start yelling when we're in person, but I'll just throw in South Africa because I remember people yelling this in a joyful way. So now I'm looking to see what laws are being considered or introduced or other legislation this year related to South Africa. And I see that a Democrat from California, who's on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, introduced legislation calling for renewed, decisive, and robust international collaboration and coordination to fight COVID-19 across Africa. Here is the congressional record discussing, having remarks about reparation proposals for African Americans in the United States. Here's a bill from a Republican in South Carolina preventing foreign attempts to erode healthcare innovation. It's in the Senate. You see that letter S? That means Senate, and H means House. And when I see the same bill is in the House and Senate, that tells me it maybe has more momentum. But what is this? Only a headline, right? So we click on the bill itself, and you can get a summary. This bill prohibits the use of federal funds to support, allow, or facilitate the negotiation or approval of any measure of the World Trade Organization to waive intellectual property rights, including the waiver proposed by India and South Africa to suspend certain provisions of the agreement on trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights to facilitate the prevention, containment, and treatment of COVID-19. Right now, I have huge respect for the interpreters on this call. What this is doing is saying the companies, which are going to probably be US companies, that are trying to come up with medications, vaccines, therapeutics for COVID-19 should be able to keep those private and patent them. And India and South Africa, they want there to be no patents or intellectual property rights surrounding COVID-19. And this law would stop that. So they're saying there's 600 novel treatments under development, 130 vaccines, 176 in preclinical trials, and these companies that are developing these should get to make all the profits off of those. One thing interesting about looking at this page is that we have this process in the United States of how a introduced law becomes a law. So it becomes introduced, there will be a number of hearings, then it passes the Senate, passes the House, or at the House side, it passes the House and passes the Senate. Then it goes to the president, and then it becomes law. And that filter going through that process means almost all of our bills, our introduced laws, do not become laws. A resolution is just like, we call for this today, but it doesn't have any substantive power. And so this resolution, they might agree to it in the House. Something in the congressional record has no teeth whatsoever. It's just putting it down in writing that we think that we need to pass this law to study and develop reparation proposals. Here's another one. Let's say you are in a country with albatross and petrels, and you're writing about trying to preserve these birds. You can see that here in the United States, and this is typically how I use this tool, there's a Democrat from California, Alan Lowenthal, who seems to care about albatrosses and petrels and their conservation. So it might be worth, if you're writing about them in Cape Town, South Africa, it might be worth saying, here's a member of US Congress, and contact them and say, why are you interested in this? Why do you care about this? And you know, if you go back to the lobbying, you might find that there was a little bit of lobbying around this. Today, we're not going over campaign contributions, but those are also public. So my interest in time, I think we're going to look at the Office of Government Ethics to see disclosure forms, because the Americans working in your countries have to disclose what their finances are. And I'm going to just walk you through how to do it. This means what they're invested in, what stocks they hold, what their bank accounts look like. In order to look at this, you go to the Office of Government Ethics and you click on Access Ethics Documents, and then come all the way over to the right here and view officials' individual disclosures. And then you want to click on this banner, releasing that you're not doing anything unlawful. Scroll on down. And you just want to use this filter. Just putting in Iceland. It's a bit of a slow website. There was a controversial ambassador from Iceland. Let's give it a second. Questions as we're doing this? Stand by, because this, I believe it just takes a moment on this site. I'm going to say that the Office of Government Ethics site is a little bit frozen this one.
Says no matching records found, Martha.
Nah, there's matching records. It just sits like that for a couple minutes.
Huh.
Maybe I'll just let that one bake for a moment. Okay. The next one I want to show you is, where are people from my country working and how do I find out about visas and green cards? This is a private company called My Visa Jobs that uses the Freedom of Information Act to survey visas. And you can get a lot of detail about different types of visas here, but I'm going to suggest you try green card. And then I can throw in any country. I'm thinking India just because there's a lot of Silicon Valley green cards. So now what we're looking at is in 2022, how many people with citizenship in India got green cards in the United States, and where do they work? The largest employer is Amazon.com, followed by Microsoft, Infosys, Tata Consultancy Service, which hires them and then sublets them basically to tech firms. Walmart. If I want to look at Walmart, what jobs are they doing? I click on it and I can see that the lead jobs, they're actually hiring them for tech jobs. If I want to see a particular individual, I can click on it and I can see Walmart. The salary was $133,000 for, they'll average that out. Here's the individuals who are the people at Walmart who are setting up these visas. These are H-1B, sorry, green cards, the average salary was $125,000. You can see if they had dependents going back. I also might want to see how many people of Indian citizenship are working in the Silicon Valley. So I could click on San Jose and see what types of jobs people have, which is again, software engineers. I can see, okay, you're working at eBay. How much are they making? $160,000. And here's the individuals who are working on getting them the jobs. Again, a lot of tech jobs. You can compare this to other countries. You can compare this to different places. Anyone want me to throw in their country on this?
I think someone said Russia.
Oh, interesting. Okay, let's see. I'm going to look in 2021, Russia. Again, tech jobs. Far fewer. We're in the under 100 here. Let's see. Who's working at Google? These are the people at Google whose job it is to help them get their visas. Here's the H-1B visas. Here's the green cards. You can see they had 4 denied from Russia. And now we're just looking at Google's, where Google, people working at Google are coming from. China, India, Australia, South Korea. They have someone from New Zealand.
That was a popular question you asked. Other people want to know about Egypt, Switzerland, Afghanistan.
Love it. Okay, let's do a couple quickies. Egypt. very small numbers. Everybody, it's interesting, there's a physician or a nanny, that's very adorable. Also maybe a little suspect, but they got Syed Saad Ali a nanny job, like, entirely possible. Pharmacists, couple of doctors, one in Poland, Maine, which might be a hospital or a community that would have a hard time finding a domestic doctor. Also, Missouri, Washington, Missouri has an adult hospitalist physician. And then there was another country somebody mentioned.
Switzerland or Afghanistan.
Okay, we could do Afghanistan all day long on all of these and have interesting things to see.
It also ties to someone else's question. What sort of stories would these visas lead to?
Well, for example, Indian tech workers that we were looking at come to the Silicon Valley, and you see those nice high salaries they're getting, but they end up sending all that money home. So what if there's a community in India that's entirely dependent on one Indian student or one Indian scholar, tech scholar's salary coming from Google, and how far does that money reach? And so you're maybe looking at a village, or maybe you're looking at the competitive educational situation in India that has these students just killing themselves to get these degrees to qualify for these jobs. You want some data. There's this many approved in this year. Google has this many people, so that you can go beyond the anecdote of the individual or the village that you're seeing to here's what the bigger picture is. Further, if someone wants to come to the Silicon Valley or partner with an American journalist, they'll find that these Indian tech workers live 9 to a house. It's so expensive to live here. They can't buy a house here for less than a couple $1 million. So 160,000 sounds like a lot until you realize how very expensive it is to live here. And these people attempting to send money home are not managing to do so. I think that the Egyptian doctors is interesting in that and you could call those hospitals and probably find those doctors. US medical systems are so depleted. We have such a doctor shortage right now that they're giving visas in these very rural or more remote communities to doctors from your country. And therefore your country may be losing qualified doctors to the United States. You also could look it up by physician, like you could look it up by occupation group here and see healthcare. How many healthcare workers is my country losing to better salaries in the United States? So those are just some ideas. I think that honestly, from where you guys are sitting, you're going to have more and better ideas than me when you start playing with these tools.
And then there's 2 questions that are related to this.
Mhm.
First one is, how credible is this myvisajobs.com? And then the next one is whether this database is comprehensive. Does it include all the green cards granted for a particular country?
Yeah, this is a very comprehensive site. They are searching through they are collecting and quantifying all of the US CIS, Citizen and Immigration Service data. Afghanistan 2022, not looking so good. They've got a couple cooks, which I think is really cool, and a construction laborer. But I want to look at how this differs, like 2015 to 2019. How did that look? And of course, this is a number of years, but there's still just very minimal amounts of green cards. People from Afghanistan are much more likely to be getting a different type of visa. This is really about job visas. They're going to be getting refugee, asylum, that type of visa, not a job visa. These visas are we need this person to work here, and there's nobody from the United States who can do this job. And they've made the case. And again, like here's a Afghan citizen hospitalist, doctor, deciding to work here. Not to mention a sandwich artist. So I'm cognizant of time. I'm going to keep going through this. In fact, I'm going to jump ahead to something similar, which is Import Genius, which I also is very, whoever keeps asking me how credible things are, is a nice credible source that I'm using a lot. Import Genius, you need to log in. So for your purposes today, if you've been following along with me, you're going to need to just watch the screen today. When you mail something, have you ever mailed anything to another country and you have to like fill out a little form at the post office that says like, this is a t-shirt, this is a book, and I'm sending it to another country? All of those are what are called customs bills of lading, or they end up being considered that. And Import Genius and one other company, Penjiva, collect all of those and digest them. And so for here, you can see, I spent a lot of time with this tool during the pandemic, looking at things like N95 masks or gowns or swabs to see why there were shortages. But I also frequently use this tool to see what is coming in or out to the United States of GIJN, which are now largely banned. I'm looking at USA, but you can see we have import-export data from these countries. And you can ask the salespeople at Import Genius on their front page, and they frequently give journalist accounts. So you can see the import-export from all these different countries. I'm doing a USA search just for the purposes of demo. This should get us up to 2 days ago. Items coming in and out of the United States. And I was looking at imports. We can also look at exports. I doubt there's any exports to GIJN from the United States, but could be interesting. Using this tool, I've been able to show that people who are in forced re-education camps are being forced to make things, including human hair extensions that were getting imported into the United States. We can only see imports to the United States that are in shipping containers. Air traffic, overland trains and trucks are not covered and are not transparent in the United States, although AP is working on that. I want to work with fish. Seafood always intrigues me. So here's a company, Cove Foods, in Dublin, California, that is importing frozen pompano, golden, farm-raised, I believe that's seafood. This center party to notify is often just a broker, but the shipper is interesting. Here's a company, and it's aquatic product, and they are in the Xinjiang area, and it's called a workshop, also raising red flags. Sometimes you get a real street address, at which point we begin using satellite imagery to find out what's going on there. You can see the product details, refrigerator container, ship, and sometimes you can see marks on the packaging. We can't see that here. So in this way, if I'm doing an investigation into what the US is importing from Xinjiang, I could start by just going and talking to these folks, and have been known to door knock on the addresses I see of the importers. I found an importer of needles and injections when we were preparing for the vaccine in the US, just living in like an apartment complex near the San Francisco airport.
Someone suggested that Import Genius would be interesting if you search for Venezuela.
I do sometimes. Hang on. I have a colleague, Joshua Goodman, who does a lot of work with Venezuela, and he sometimes he actually now has his own account, and we do some looking at this. Let's see, we've got, what is this? You have to go into each one. So I did a big project earlier this year using this, where I looked at every single item from Russia to the United States since the outbreak of the war. Thousands and thousands of shipments since the outbreak of the invasion of Ukraine. The only way I did it was I was locked down for 20 days with COVID. And so I was able to open up every single one and move them into spreadsheets and analyze whether they were legit or not. But here is a Swiss company. The broker is potentially a in the Netherlands. And then the shipper has blocked their, not available, it means they've blocked their data, right? But you still can read into the container number. Dangerous liquids, liquefied gas. And the only reason Venezuela came up on the shipment is because there's some legal language. So this shipment did not have to do anything with Venezuela. It just was because there's legal language that says you can ship this except here, you know, except the THC to Europe, Venezuela, and Bangladesh. There's some legal language surrounding the trade on that. So that's why you have to open every single one, even if you can download it. The one that I'm curious about is this very important hazelnut cocoa cream. And this shipper is in Istanbul. The broker is in Venezuela, and the person receiving it is in Venezuela. And this is a really nice demonstration of how a review of US imports actually shows us how somebody in Turkey is shipping the all-important Nutella equivalent to Venezuela. It must pop through the United States on its route. And so that's why we get a record of it. Stop at a US port on its route. And here's the address in Venezuela where it goes to. Here's a company in Istanbul where it starts. Let's see one more. A Land Cruiser earlier this week was shipped. This is from UAE to Venezuela coming through the United States. So somebody in UAE is sending a Toyota Land Cruiser to Venezuela. You get also a motorcycle, also a Suzuki. So some vehicles are going from UAE to Venezuela. Intriguing. Whoever suggested this, yes?
Yeah, there are 3 other questions related to this. One is a suggestion whether you can try orchids imported by the US.
Orchids.
The other one is more of a cost question. What does Import Genius cost to you, and do they give discounts to journalists?
They give discounts or free accounts to journalists. It's not costing me. They give it for free. They, as a company, understand the value to journalists of this data because we use it to track labor abuse in supply chains. We use it to track people who are violating sanctions, and they support that. I'm seeing some interesting orchids and also some different language around orchids. Also, you know, Orchid Island creations. So the word can come up in a lot of items, but here's a company. The shipper is the Taiwan Sugar Corporation. The recipient, I was going to say orchids are grown right near my house. This is Aromas, like half an hour from me. The broker's in San Francisco. There's a huge flower market in San Francisco that they go through. So they have to keep them at the centigrade inside their shipping container. This is so interesting to me, whoever suggested this, because they claim in Aromas that all of their orchids are locally grown. So this is a little bit hilarious that on 10/22, 1 container with 613 cartons of these Taiwan orchids arrived and were sent to this area where we have an orchid festival coming up where it's all locally grown orchids in the hothouses. So if I go with my mother, perhaps I'll ask them about this. It would be a good local story for sure.
And the third question was curious as to why would air cargo or lorry, for that matter, not be included in the data set? Surely the same importation regulations and forms have to be filled and therefore digitized, or is it just port data easier to source for some reason?
No, it's because the law that mandates this transparency was passed in 1930. So it's called the U.S. Tariff Act of 1930. All of these companies, Walmart, Intel, Amazon are currently lobbying US Congress and Customs and Border Protection to stop making this transparent on ships. But when the reason why they haven't done that, have not blocked it all, is because the 1930 Tariff Act has language that says it has to be public. That Tariff Act was passed before cargo was moving around in airplanes, and before very much was moving around even on trains and trucks. It was really largely coming in and moving around on ships. So we are making an effort to continue this transparency on ships, and AP and some other journalism organizations, and I've been personally lobbying David, are pushing to make even more of this data available.
It's vital this kind of data stays publicly accessible. And Martha mentioned just a few of the kinds of stories you can do based on this data. You know, our supply chains today are global. It's the food we eat for breakfast, the medicines we take at night, the toys our kids play with in the afternoon. All of that is being shipped internationally. To do, you know, Martha's, one of her Pulitzers is for documenting how seafood tied to enslaved workers ends up on US supermarket shelves. Do you use Import Genius?
100%, 100%. That there's no way we could have done that journalism that led to 2,000 people being freed without this data. We have found, like, when a denim factory burst into flames and people died in India, we tied that to the US companies who were paying for those blue jeans to be made. Again and again and again, like I say, Uyghur re-education centers, we use this. And I mean, not just AP, many news organizations use this to show Thai labor abuse to corporations in the US, Europe, and elsewhere. And in doing so, you know, we do what we do best, which is hold those in power accountable, rather than, oh, that's just some place in the Philippines where this is happening. No, that stuff is coming, as you say, right into our homes.
Hey, Martha, we're starting to run low on time. Did you have more you want to
No,
share?
let's, I mean, I have lots more, but let's take questions.
Sure. Yeah, Eunice, you want to chime in with a few more questions?
There's a whole bunch. We're going to go back to the beginning bit when you mentioned a few red flags that you spotted. So some people ask, on foreign assistance, what are some of the red flags that they should be looking for in these spending records?
And let me add on to that, Martha. One of favorite tools I've used over the years are audits that USAID and other agencies have done of their international programs.
Yeah.
Anything to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is the Office of Inspector General for USAID is going to be using the data from foreign assistance. You guys are going to have to just start taking notes on this, but they audit red flags that show up on the foreign assistance. And so you can see, let's look at their Ukraine investigations dashboard. They investigate how USAID is spending money in different places. And so you can see all kinds of details in these. This is how much has been spent on NGOs or contractors. So when the US is like, we're sending this much money to Ukraine, not really, we're sending it to maybe US and maybe international organizations that are then spending the money to buy things for Ukraine. Maybe looks like the World Food Program has been receiving a lot of money. These are breakdowns. You can see who traveled there, where they went. This is just USAID. This is reviewing complaints or disclosures. They had 2 cases of theft, 2 cases of conflict of interest, 1 program disruption due to military conflict, You can see case summaries, and you can get into the weeds on these. The theft diversion in April 2022, the Office of Inspector General received information from a public international organization that supplies were stolen in Lviv, Ukraine. They referred the case. This would be something you might want to file a Freedom of Information Act request over. I haven't heard of that being reported. So
This ties into one question, which is they ask whether FOIA requests can be filed by reporters from foreign countries or just US citizens.
Anybody can file a Freedom of Information Act request, and you will find their opportunities to do so at this bottom area of most federal government websites. You do not need to be a US citizen. Let me just see if it's here. Let me look at.
Yeah, we have a FOIA guide on our site, GIJN.org, which will show you how to do that. And there's some good sites as well that can help guide you through the process.
But the bottom line is anybody can file one. Here's the State Department. They're usually just a form to fill out now. So.
And if they are denied data for any reason, are there any, appeals that they can? Okay.
Yep, and GIJN can help you work your way through an appeal. And if you're, for me, like I file Freedom of Information requests in other countries, and my biggest challenge is finding people to translate for me because I need to file it in their language. But because I have colleagues in a number of countries, I'm able to do it, and GIJN can also help you network to do that. One time I filed the same request in 105 countries, and I got very surprising responses. It was about terrorism and how many people had been prosecuted for terrorism. And, we found that a lot of governments were using their terrorism laws to stop people from public expression. They would just accuse them of being a terrorist, like Turkey is saying anybody saying anything in Kurdish is an act of terrorism. So yes, good question. You can FOIA anywhere. And a lot of what I've shown you today can lead to a FOIA. And these days it's almost entirely digital.
And since we're on the US Department of State website, there was a question, if I want to verify the contributions of USAID in Peru, in particular the Transparent Public Investment Project, which web pages should I explore?
I'd start with the foreign assistance page, but I also might call the State Department's media phone line. They'll tell you to put it in an email, and then they have to send you a response. It might not be a very interesting response, but if you're asking very specifically about that program, they will get somebody from their South America desk to prepare a response for you. And if you make up a deadline, like give them a deadline, even if you don't necessarily have one.
Okay, the next question, is there a way to find sanctioned contractors or people from a certain country that the US government cannot contract with?
Yes.
The OFAC lists.
Yeah, it's at Treasury. I'm afraid I don't know the site off the top of my head. It's the Office of Foreign Assets Control, which has the sanctions and program information. And here's the sanctions list. So we went to treasury.gov, Office of Foreign Assets Control, and then you can look at these sanctions lists. The best way I know is to do this search function for them, because there's all different types of sanctions lists. And so if you start looking at like the specially designated nationals, you may miss somebody. And then you can see they have additional lists. So I do this broader search when I'm trying to find them. It's not great, but like, let's just pick Afghanistan. Then you start, I'm sorry, moving you guys around. You get 73 results of individuals or entities that are sanctioned in or through Afghanistan. And if you click on them, you get more details about them. So that's the quick answer to that. Yes, that's transparent.
Okay. And what are the best sources for US military aid or military spending?
We have this on our tip sheet. I didn't go through it today, but there's some fantastic, fantastic sites. So if you go to our website, you can see what are some of the specific weapon systems and support sent from the USA to my country. You can see the excess defense articles database. You actually have to just download the whole thing and spend a lot of time searching it. It doesn't look great, but you go to this website, this link is on the tip sheet, and you can look at foreign military sales, foreign military financing, and this is the excess defense articles. You also can see training, which is something I did with a story out of Honduras, where a Honduran police unit shot and killed a 14-year-old kid. And I was able to go through this international military education and training website to show that this Honduran military unit had been trained in the United States. So this Defense Security Cooperation Agency does have to publish everything. It's often a year or two behind, but it will show you what weapons are being sold and given to different countries.
Thank you for that. There is one very specific question to UK. There's been a lot of concern in UK lately about the influence of UK think tanks, such as the International Energy Agency, on their government. And apparently they clearly have non-government US funding, but it's not transparent. And there's no legal investigative tools in the UK that seems to work for the journalists there. So any ideas how to open the can from the Washington end?
Yeah, nice question. GuideStar, which is, I guess, owned by Candid now, looks at nonprofit information. And I actually was just poking around here yesterday and found something really bizarre about Sweden, but I think you might find something similar for UK. This Bank of Sweden Terror Century Foundation is $153 million, claiming to be a nonprofit in the United States. The only thing they do is invest in US stocks. They profit off of it. Because they've created a nonprofit foundation, they don't pay any taxes on that. And they give the money as an independent grant-making foundation only to companies in Stockholm. And from these sites, you want to really just look at these tax forms, because their tax forms are public and you can see how much money they have coming in, total revenue. One thing that's interesting on these tax forms to me always is executive compensation. So the director of this Swedish investment fund that's giving grants in Sweden is, this is her name, and this is, I'm sorry, the CEO making $200,000. Again, this is all untaxed because it's a nonprofit. And I don't know the legality. We have nonprofits in the United States not having to pay taxes because they're supposed to benefit society. And this is benefiting Sweden only. I don't know. It was striking to me. And I wonder if there's something similar with UK in this GuideStar search. We are running out of time, but
yeah, just to correct, IEA was Institute of Economic Affairs, not the Energy Agency. But since we're on nonprofits, there was a question about how to study the activities of different American NGOs, for example, NED and USAID.
USAID is a government organization. It's not a nonprofit, and therefore you have a lot of information, but Toby at GIJN has noticed that in recent years, USAID is becoming less and less transparent, and we're still trying to think about why that is. I think you said NED? What did you say?
Yes, National Endowment of Democracy. I did.
Oh, so, I mean, you just start, I would look here at GuideStar, but I also would look at USA spending to see what the US government is contracting with the National Endowment of Democracy, how much the US government is spending for that agency to go work in other countries. So both USA spending and then GuideStar, here you can see how much money, what their assets are, and then most importantly, their tax forms to see what they spend on and where the money comes and goes. Read these things slowly, especially the first time you go through a 990, like just read it really slowly. And you will start to pull granular data out of it, but you don't rush through them. They're complicated.
Hey, can I jump in here, Eunice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we are reaching the end. Martha, I wonder if you can say something about all the records we haven't talked about. One of the great things about being an American journalist is you grow up sort of assuming you can access public records. If you're covering City Hall or the courts, you have access to enormous amounts of data. You haven't touched on court records or property records or corporate records, the stuff that's available through various databases or online. If you're backgrounding someone, if there's a figure from overseas who's active in the United States, you'd include all that stuff in a thorough check, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I didn't know how spoiled I was until I began working in other countries. You can see definitely what property somebody owns. I can look up right now all the property that Donald Trump owns in the United States. That's all publicly available. You mentioned court records, and I had wanted to show how to find out if you're from Bolivia, if you're a Bolivian journalist and you want to know, are there Bolivians in the US criminal justice system? What was their case? What happened when they were in court? Transcripts of the trial. Where are they now? How do I write them a letter in prison? Like, all of that is accessible. So that's why we made this tool, and I wish we could take more time to go through it, but I do think it's possible to learn about what's happening in your country. Certainly court records from Honduras, for example, tell you a tremendous amount about your own government. So
and of course, we haven't talked about the SEC and corporate records that have to be filed on a regular basis, and you look for any legal difficulties, that kind of thing that the company may be having.
Yep. The Securities Exchange Commission is, corporations are mandated to file, and whoever was asking how reliable that is, that's one, again, where you're going to go to jail if you don't do it right. So it is fairly reliable.
This I feel like we're just getting started. This is probably an all-day workshop, but we've had over 150 people with us for most of the time. It's been great. Let me go to you a last time, see if you have any concluding comments, and then we'll bring things to a close.
I know it's morning, noon, and night for everybody, but I hope you all know how much I respect and admire the incredible work you do. This is not easy in a lot of places, and I just really want you to know how much I admire your integrity and your dedication, and let's lift each other up with this work.
And back at you, Martha, you have been not just a brilliant journalist, but an educator, and you've trained so many journalists in how to fight the good fight, investigate the good investigation. We had Martha on a panel at one of our conferences a few years ago where it was on human trafficking, and everybody speaking, she had trained or influenced somehow. And so there's like a couple of generations now following in your terrific footsteps. We really thank you for your contribution. So folks, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Before we close, I want to thank our GIJN team, especially our interpreters who have been working quietly, but very responsibly in the background. Thank you to the audience. You've been great, really good questions today. And again, a big thank you to our wonderful speaker, Martha Mendoza of Associated Press. Finally, be sure to watch GIJN's Twitter feed at GIJN for details on future events. We've got a new webinar coming November 3rd on investigating conflict-related sexual violence. It's going to be quite compelling. So once again, thank you all. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Keep on the investigative trail, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks, everybody.